The lectures within the philosophy of private law, that's become a very sort of fertile area in recent years, and in our discussion we've focused a bit on the implications and illumination the lectures might have for private lawyers. But what about for philosophers, and moral philosophers in particular? What would they benefit? How would they benefit from grappling with private law issues?
Well, I hope that in the lectures I'm going to pay reasonably symmetrical attention to the contribution that these bodies of thought can make to each other. So some of the themes that are already of interest to moral philosophers and which I hope to illuminate further, I've already mentioned. Some of what I say is going to be relevant to the problems about moral luck that have already been explored rather elusively by Bernard Williams. I'm very much tempted by and wedded to the Williams picture of how we relate to the world around us, but I don't think that Williams in any very clear way at all unpacked that and showed what its implications might be for what I think of as ordinary moral problems. And so I'd like to follow in the footsteps of my former teacher, Tony Honore, and develop that in a little bit more analytical precision. And I hope that that would be of interest. I also think that there's a strange lacuna in moral and political philosophy in writings about justice, in that what I'm describing when I'm talking about reparation and other backward-looking remedies is somewhat neglected, and it's not seen as the natural response to the utilitarian or consequentialist systematizations of moral philosophy or of political philosophy, to say that they neglect the way in which our past serve rational salience. In fact, that seems to be regarded as a non-starter by some people who want to concede the forward-looking features of utilitarian or more broadly consequentialist thought and problematize them. And so I think that's an area where there's rich pickings for anybody wanting to head off in new directions in moral and political philosophy. You see, Rawls, thinking about political philosophy for a moment, Rawls encouraged us to think that the problems of distributive and corrective justice could be left for later because they belong to non-ideal theory, to a world where something's already gone wrong, whereas the problems of distributive justice can be tackled as problems for ideal theory. And I think that's a very bad misunderstanding about where the cut comes between ideal and non-ideal theory and between distributive and corrective or retributive justice. So although it's clear that wrongdoing is going to play a significant role in what I have to say, I think the lessons go wider and have more interest, and some of them are lessons for ideal theory as well. So that's a second way in which I hope that what I say might be of interest to moral philosophers. Here's a third way. I do want to develop a little bit more clearly in my own mind, and I hope this would be a benefit to others, what the place is of expressive value in the value firmament. Now, I've often resorted rather glibly in writing about moral problems to the thought that expressive value constitutes a nice contrast class for instrumental value. I've said that. Have I meant it? Have I even understood it? I'm not totally sure that I have, and I think one of the things that I'm going to explore, which I hope will be of interest, is the complexion of expressive value, how it's possible, and how it takes some of its shape from considerations that are immune to instrumental evaluation, but nevertheless depends on instrumental thinking in order to give it some of its force. So that's a place for expressive value that I don't think has been worked through before. Can I do it in a lecture? I probably can't, but I'm hoping I can make a good beginning.
What about a further potential benefit, a methodological one? Now, some people would say moral philosophers rely a lot on what they call intuitions, often wrung from fairly outlandish-looking thought experiments, as they call them. What about the focus on legal doctrine? Is that something that could be useful supplement or replacement methodology?
I don't think it could aspire to be that. I always feel rather torn about the role that the law plays in my work. So on the one hand, I think of it as a really great place to find examples that have been discussed and worked through by intelligent people trying to solve social problems, and that we should find examples there when we can. It's kind of applied moral philosophy. So that's one role that the law plays for me. But I also want, as I suggested before, to make philosophically intelligible the body of doctrine and deliberation that we find in the law, and then it's not just a source of ready examples. It's a subject of study in its own right. Now, does that in any way get rid of the need for intuitions? Well, I'm particularly unhappy about pleading intuitions, but I think that might be a separate matter. I don't like to plead intuitions because I don't think that pleading them is helpful. But does that mean I'm not relying on them in the sense of just shaping my argument in an intuitively credible way? Well, probably I am. I'm hoping I do that. Some people say I can't be doing that because everything's so completely incredible in what I write, and they've never had an intuition like that in their lives, but I can't help it if they don't share mine.
Do you think there's any asymmetry between what you called the body of law that reflects some kind of collective wisdom on the one hand, people actually making real life decisions that impact upon others, and the ruminations of philosophers on the other? Do you think one deserves a kind of greater respect or epistemic weight?
Not particularly, although I do think it's interesting that theoretical propositions about counterproductivity and self-defeatingness, which I think are really quite central to thinking about ethics, that they are tested in the law. So somebody will have the bright idea to prohibit something or to make it actionable in the courts, and it won't be long before you'll find out, thanks to the law, just exactly how much harm that decision can do. People will start hiding away rather than saving people because they know as soon as they save people, they're going to be reported for doing it badly or sued for making mistakes and so on. So they would rather not go to the canal. That's only the simplest example where the law can point to counterproductivity or self-defeatingness concerns, but there are plenty more. So I've always found that to be a benefit of knowing the law and using the law, is that the more consequentialist aspects of the assessment of norms can be tested in institutional environments. They're not purely tested. You're testing them complete with other features that might not be there in an ideal world, but that's still a good way to test them and to be alerted to possible risks in adopting some rules, as social rules as well as legal ones.
Thanks, John. Thanks so much for the discussion, and we very much look forward to your lectures later this year.
My pleasure. Thank you.